Alex here again with another image review. This one is mostly Red Sea pictures, but starting off with hopefully what's a final view from my Bahamas trip. It's been such a productive trip that every time I open the folder and look at the pictures, I'm like, oh my gosh, I really ought to process those ones as well. So there's a few of those, and then we go on to some Red Sea pictures, 35 pictures in this selection. All these pictures are relatively recent, either this year or the end of last year, and they are all taken with Sony A1. No variation there. I'm trying to use this time to catch up with a bit of processing, so I've also got a folder of Asian pictures that I need, to Southeast Asian pictures from either Indonesia or the Philippines to get into this as well. So hopefully they'll be turning up on here soon as well as I work through there. Lots of really cool pictures actually. It's amazing how when you're busy shooting as much as I am, you take, I'm always try and take nice pictures on my dives, but I try and put a lot of effort into editing, culling them down, getting them, keyworded and that sort of thing. But I often then run out of time to actually start processing them. And so when I do open these folders up, there are loads of pictures. I'm like, oh, I really have to do that one. So anyway, let's get on with these shark pictures just to kick us off. The first one is this lemon shark just resting on the seabed. The lemons do rest sometimes on the seabed. And while I was photographing this one, and I'd spent my time creeping up to it, and so it didn't swim away, I was able to get this tiger shark in the background, which is quite cool. Just to have a tiger shark as a bit of background interest. There's tiger sharks as foreground interest in this one. And we've got a pair of tigers coming in. They're coming in on bait here. The bait I've kept out of frame, out of the composition. We set the bait up at the edge of the seagrass so we could get that green of the seagrass into the picture. And I like the interaction between the two tigers here. It's not just here's another tiger shark. They're actually interacting. All these pictures I think are pretty much taken with the FCP. This one I'll probably show you the settings because you're probably more interested. So this is down at 1/10 of a second. I've gone down to ISO 80. So the previous one you see I was shooting ISO 200, something like that. F13, 1/200th. It's very bright at Tiger Beach. Here in cloudy conditions, I've dropped my ISO further to ISO 80 to allow me to get down to that 1/10 of a second. And I've closed the aperture to F18 again to allow me to get that slow shutter speed. So it's that 80th and that F18 that's giving me the slow shutter speed that's allowing me to create this panning shot. And I like this. It's quite an extreme panning shot. The shark isn't that close, but it gives a lot more background. And obviously it's the background that's really blurring. So I like this one with a bit of space around the shark. Next up, a very sort of straight up classic in your face portrait of a tiger shark. I think what I like about this one is there's actually a little sucker. I don't know if it's they're tiny lampreys or what they are. I'm trying to zoom in a bit more than this. How do I zoom in more than that? Nope. There we go. You can see just inside the mouth there's some sort of fluke or something attached there inside the mouth of this tiger shark. However fierce a predator you are, there's someone feeding on you in some way or another. So just a very standard shot, but a real in-your-face shot. And I just thought I couldn't ignore this one, even though it's not anything remarkable. It is still very likeable. I like this one. I thought I didn't have enough shots of tigers with reef sharks in the frame. And this was quite a neat arrangement with the boat, with the tiger, and then with the two reef sharks flanking it. And there's actually another reef shark on behind the tiger shark. And it's just that formation I thought was rather nice. Tells the Tiger Beach story all in one frame, this one, which I think is quite nice too. And then the final one is a tiger shark swimming. It's slightly closer than the reef shark, but they're both quite a long way off. And this was a very big tiger shark, probably the biggest one we saw. And it really shows the size difference between the tiger shark and the reef shark. I know the reef shark is a little bit further away, but it shows the impressive size that these tigers grow to. Right, and now we can swing into the Red Sea. And the first shot of these is rather an unusual one, and I can't believe I'd not processed this one out before, just because it's the only time I've ever seen this behaviour. This is a spearing mantis shrimp. You're very used to seeing their sort of speckly faces sticking out of the seabed, but out of the burrows that they make in the seabed. But this is one actually in the process of digging a burrow. And I've never seen one dig a burrow before, but what this one was doing is it was basically digging a great big hole in the seabed, like a trench in the seabed. And it was clearly then going to build up its burrow in that by, I guess, using some stones and things like that to actually create a burrow for it in the seabed. So they start with a big hole and then fill it back in to create the burrow. And we're used to seeing this end of them, which is the speckly end of them, whereas a lot of the animal is actually this end of them, which is actually very stripy and very. So the bit that we're used to seeing as divers is only a small part of the animal, but also what most of the animal doesn't look like, because it's got a completely different pattern. It's got the camouflage pattern, which looks a bit like sand or gravel. Whereas the rest of the body has got this big warning coloration. And I guess it has this warning coloration of these very prominent stripes for situations like this, where it is out of its burrow and it needs to dig a hole in the seabed. And in doing so, it wants to warn things, leave me alone, I've got nasty things. I like this shot because of all the... I mean, I didn't have the right lens and it was very much a grab shot, but it's the only time I've seen this behaviour in thousands of dives, so I definitely wanted to photograph it. What was interesting was the way all the other reef fish were kind of crowding around these chromis at the top and the butterfly fish. They weren't really mobbing the mantis shrimp, but they were definitely crowding around it saying, we can see you, we can see you. So they were well aware that there was a nasty predator in their midst. Another weird creature that you don't see often, this is a sponge goby from the Red Sea. It's endemic to the Red Sea, very little known species, but this was taken at Ras Khati, which is one of the sort of check dive sites just outside of Sharm el Sheikh. And yeah, just the only time I've knowingly photographed this species. I can't remember its Latin name. I'll just look it up for you. It's called Bryniops spongicolus, because it's a sponge goby, and it's only found on the dwarf goby, found on these sponges. So pretty cool to see. And then an EMWL shot of a moray eel. I like this one just because of the bit of habitat around. Moray eels always shoot well with the EMWL. They don't run away. You can position the lens very close to them. You can make even small ones look big and big ones look like Tyrannosauruses. And this is quite a fun one. But the reason I chose this one is actually I like the bit of habitat. Often when you shoot them with the EMWL, because you can get so close and fill the frame with them, you end up with just this almost sort of chopped off head. Decapitated head of a moray eel, and I like this one because you can actually see the body and you can actually see the reef behind it. This one here is a blue spotted stingray digging in the sand. I like the behaviour in this shot, and I like the reef background in this. It's a very pleasing shot. This is shot with the Nikonos 15mm lens, so the old rectilinear wide angle lens from the Nikonos 5, modified to work on just with an attachment to work on my modern Sony A1 mirrorless camera. So you don't get any EXIF data. You get the shutter speed, but you don't get the aperture. But I shoot this always at f11, so it's at f11 1/25 of a second, ISO 640. It was quite late in the evening, this shot. And I just like the behaviour. I like the aspect ratio. It's a very nice lens for kind of medium to large animals doing stuff, or for shooting individual things. And yeah, I try and take it on trips, and I use it, a couple of dives every trip or so. You don't see lots of pictures from it, but I do like showing it. This was really, really quite remarkable behaviour I'd not seen before of this little hawkfish. It's got lovely tassels on its back, on its dorsal fin there. This little hawkfish perched on a sea anemone. It's on the skirt of a magnificent sea anemone. And not only does it make a really interesting colour combination with obviously the bright red and the blue water, but also I'd just not seen one of these guys happily on an anemone before, which I think is quite unusual to see. Right, into the world of spinner dolphins. These are some pictures taken at Sataya Reef in Fury Shoal in Egypt. It's a place that when I'm in that part of Egypt, we try and go to for a little bit of the day. to see the dolphins. Sometimes you get lucky and you get good encounters, sometimes you don't. We always are very respectful of the dolphins, and on this day, although we were having really good encounters, as the dolphins became less playful with us, we decided to stop. So they were still keen to interact, but we thought we'd leave them before they really wanted to be left alone. They get bothered by lots of people there, so I think it's good to be respectful, and I think all the group really liked that, because people got great shots, people have got award-winning shots on this snorkel. But at the same time, I think everyone left knowing that we'd really behaved properly and left at the right time, left these guys in peace to get on with their lives. Because they do see a lot of people. They don't really mind it, I don't feel, when they're early in the morning, when they're kind of keen to play. But as they sort of go into their sleep mode, I think, and they tend to, instead of swimming up and down and swimming energetically, they tend to just cruise underwater. At that point, we tend to leave them alone. Anyway, I like the fact that they're big pods, that you've got all sorts of different things going on. There's a main individual coming close. There's formation flying in the background. There's sort of males and females interacting in the middle ground of the picture. It's just really got lots going on, this picture, and it's got nice sunbeams as well. This is one of the male-female groups. This is probably two males and a single female. The female is the one at the back, at the top, and then these two males were taking it in turns to mate with her. The two in the back are mating in this picture. And yeah, I like particularly that foreground male, how close he is to the camera. You've got lots of great detail. You know, you can really see all the fantastic detail on the dolphin. But you've got the behaviour, and then you've got the other pod a little bit further away in the background. And this is, I think, the same individuals, maybe again. But yeah, again, I like this one. I like the split of the three dolphins. There's almost like they're exploding out of the picture. You've got the top one, the middle one, and the bottom one, which are the kind of the main features of the picture. This little pod was in very shallow water, and I like the ability to get that bit of seabed into the picture, and I like the horizon line on this. Unfortunately, the picture is horizontal, but the seabed was sloping at this point. So kind of the seabed is a kind of a bit of a weird shape in this one. You could have corrected it. I think the picture would be more pleasing if that dark blue line was very horizontal, but it wasn't like that in nature, so I'm not going to try and correct for that in post processing. And then this is a group towards the end. Actually, you can see in the formation of the dolphins how they're now not playing at the surface. They're not doing all the mating and interaction in little groups. They've kind of formed a much more solid bank of dolphins, and they're swimming predominantly subsurface. And this is kind of when they're beginning to go towards their sleep mode. And this is actually the last couple of photos I took. There's still a few playful ones you can see here, but they're basically going towards their sleep mode at this point during the day. So these were the last pictures we took, and then we left them alone. On that trip we experienced a lot of coral bleaching in the southern Red Sea in November at the end of last year. And this is and I've processed most of those pictures out, but I really like this shot, and I was actually quite surprised I hadn't processed it out with this Goniastria coral in the foreground, all bleached with the colourful fish on it, which I think really shows how bleached it is. I think without that fish, you might not know that the coral isn't supposed to be this colour. So I always, when you're shooting bleaching, it's always nice to have something to compare the bleaching to. If the whole picture's white, it doesn't really shout something's wrong here, whereas a picture like this I think really does. And so there's lots of detail in this, so a magazine might use it quite as a tight shot, but I like the little bit of reef behind. It gives a feeling of it being a normal environment, and it shows how corals create this environment for all these species, and that's why bleaching is such a problem when it happens, because so many species are dependent on the corals. I haven't really shown you many camera settings on these, but this one was FCP. The dolphins were all 13mm Nikonos fisheye. Just so you know. Then this is the 90mm lens, a pair of lizardfish just on the reef, standard shot. The lizardfish, I think it's often when you have a female that's maybe ready to spawn, the male will just keep following her around. I don't know, but you'll quite often see lizardfish gathered in pairs or even in little groups together. And there usually seems to be one fish that when it moves, all the rest move after it. So I presume it's a female and the rest of the fish are males. They often don't sit completely parallel like this. So it can be quite easy to get two in a picture, but hard to get four eyes all in focus. And that's what I like this shot. That's why I processed it out, because I've got all four eyes. If I can scroll my way across the frame, all four of the eyes are pretty much sharp, which is really cool. In a shallow depth of field shot, because the problem of this angle was that I was shooting down into the reef, so I needed to open the aperture, out to 5.6 in order to get that blurry background. A panning shot of Sergeant Major. It's not a beautiful image, but I do like the panning effect in this one, so I processed it out. And then a blue spotted stingray just resting on the reef. Very common, very typical sight in the Red Sea. Not always easy to get your fisheye lens right up onto the blue spotted stingray to make this shot work. I must have taken variations of this shot 100 times without the blue spotted stingray being quite big enough for the picture to work. But here I was able to get that a little bit closer and get the image to work. Classic Red Sea scenery. Lots and lots of colourful soft corals in this one. And a green turtle. I think these are all, with the Nikonos 13mm fisheye. A green turtle just resting on the seabed on the saddle at Ras Mohammed as it is. This one is obviously made more interesting because it's carrying this very characterful remora who's sitting there posing with his mouth open on the back of the turtle, which I really like. Some fish portraits now. Just a common regal angelfish, but they're such a beautiful fish, and a nice portrait of one of these. I don't think as a photographer you need to be too fussy with these. It's such a beautiful fish. I think the viewer wants just to appreciate and enjoy the fish. So no need for fancy techniques. Allow the viewer to enjoy seeing this fish, with as much separation from the background as you can manage. Another little beautiful fish, a pink-eyed goby. They have to make a big fuss about showing you these in the Philippines, and if you dive in the Red Sea, or particularly in the Maldives, they're super common. You just can see thousands on dives. The Red Sea, not thousands, but in the coral-rich areas, you can certainly see hundreds on a dive. And so, they're fun to photograph, easy to photograph. Particularly individually, it's quite hard, I think, to get good shots of the groups of them. But as individuals, they photograph well. And they have such beautiful, pretty fish. Zoom in. Let's have a look at this guy. Really, really nice. Right. A pair of white-bellied damselfish spawning. This is the male at the top, and he's guarding the female as she lays eggs. And this is the female here. You can see her ovipositors down, and she's laying these little brand new eggs onto the far coral. I've photographed white-bellied damselfish spawning for years and years in the Red Sea, but it's always nice to add another shot to the portfolio of them. Blue-green chromis spawning. The males often, but not always, but often develop this black dorsal fin with a yellow tip when they're in their mating colours. You can see it there. But sometimes they don't. You watch them spawning and the coloration doesn't seem to be a preference point for the females. The way they spawn is the males set up little territories all in quite a small area, and then the females choose a male to spawn with. And watching them, the females always have a favourite male. But it's not always the one with the most colourful dorsal fin. It seems, in my observations, it seems to be, I think, the one who either has got the best location of the nest, or it's simply that the one that all the females decide to spawn with, all the other females want to spawn with too. And that might be the main determining factor. But anyway, the smaller female here, as you can see, she's got her ovipositor down, if I can zoom in the right place. And she's laying eggs onto the seabed. There might even be an egg coming out in this photo. And the male is then going to fertilise them afterwards. The male spends most of its time trying to display to the female. So this is the male going to the edge of his territory, spreading out all his fins, trying to look as impressive as possible, doing a wiggly dance, and the females are all watching on here, sizing him up. You can see this female here, she's got her ovipositor down, ready to spawn. A group of goatfish underneath the boats at Gota Abu Ramada. And I chose to process this one out just because I like the two divers in the picture. I think they help link those dive boats with the fish. And I think this is really just a nice diving picture. It's not really wildlife or anything like that, but with the two divers, you can see they've come from the boats or they're going back to the boats, and it tells a really nice story of the amazing things that they're seeing during the dive. There's an interloper for parrotfish in the goatfish school. A colourful reef scene, just one of those celebratory shots. Beautiful, beautiful Red Sea soft corals growing in an overhang. This is at the satellite reef at on Ras Mohammed, which I just thought was really good for wide angle scenery this particular year. So nice to shoot. Shot with both of these are shot with the Nikonos 13mm. Now onto the WACP. This is Reda, our dive guide, swimming into a school of glassfish at Shark Observatory dive site. There was lots of us here trying to photograph, and this is very much a grab shot. I when it was my turn and Reda was nearby, I just waved for him to come into the shot. I thought it was just a nice setup. It's not a perfect image at all. I don't think the glassfish are particularly well organised. But I wanted to process it out. It's a nice memory shot, and I wanted to get a diver shot of that situation. This is the same situation, but I think a much more pleasing image of this lionfish and the colourful reef with the sea fans and the glassfish. It's a really bustling, busy reef scene, which I really like. Both taken with WACP. Just a portrait of a coral grouper, always a favourite fish of mine. And then the last couple are onto the Rex. This is in the Thistlegorm, as I'm sure everyone knows. A group of 3 Norton motorbikes and a bunch of soldier fish above them. And I rather like this shot. This one, I took away some of the fisheye distortion because this beam at the front was bent with the fisheye distortion. And so the main correction I did to this was to correct that line in the image, just to get rid of that bent line, because it did look a bit strange in this particular shot. So a rare occasion of me taking the fisheye distortion out of a picture, and it's shot with the Nikon 8-15mm actually. And then this final one, also shot with the Nikon 8-15, and must have been using the 8-15 quite a bit on this trip, is the tile wreck. So a load of tiles on the seabed in this is the Chrysula K wreck at Abu Nuhas, and when the conditions are right there, when it's calm, the wreck comes very shallow, and this area is always amazing for sunbeams. People always see a sunbeam shot and they go, "Oh, Alex, what are the settings?" And in this case, they're f13 or 400 at 320. But it's of course you need to expose the sun correctly, but it's the conditions that gave this amazing sunball. And, I could tell before this dive, the wind was dropping away, the sun was going to be low in the sky, and in the shallow part of the wreck, the sun was going to be stunning. And actually on this particular dive, which was our 4th dive of the day already, I think that, I didn't even go to the deep end of the wreck because I just knew that the sun was going to be stunning. And so I spent my time up towards the shallow end, focusing on the sun with a few of the guys from the workshop, because, it was just such great conditions to get these amazing sunbeams. So I hope that was an interesting run through, and I'll be back again soon when I've processed another batch. Bye.